Hey guys, this is the Revolutionary Male. My name is Alex. Welcome back. Today I'm going to go ahead and start with an article written in Psychology Today by Mark Sherman. It's entitled, it's back from 2011, so it's a bit old, but it's very relevant, and it's going to give us an opportunity to talk about some stuff that's interesting. The article is entitled, "The End of Boys. Titles like the end of men are euphemisms." So let's get into this. He begins, "The titles of 3 recent publications sound almost like they are a joke. There was Maureen Dowd's 2005 book, Are Men Necessary? And then in 2010, Hannah Rosen's article in The Atlantic, The End of Men. And most recently, September 2011, a debate at NYU on the resolution, Men Are Finished. The idea that the gender that has always been the dominant one worldwide could be in trouble might strike some as ludicrous and others as payback. And it is hard to feel sorry for grown men, especially those in positions of power and influence, but there is something that makes me much less than amused by those hyperbolic but not terribly off-the-mark titles. I am the father of 3 sons and the grandfather of 3 grandsons." Think about that for a second, fellas. The only reason this man is concerned about these titles and these articles and these ideas, not because of the ideas themselves, or the way they might disadvantage or pathologize or discriminate against men, but because of the potential future that his sons and grandsons are walking into. He doesn't even care about it for himself. That's what men are. We care more about other people than we do ourselves. And even he can barely come to this conclusion. He has to make all these accommodations about how men have been the dominant group worldwide for most of human history and blah, blah, blah. When all that stuff is categorically false. Or at least it's, if not categorically false, it's only half the picture. But let's continue. Perhaps there seems to be little need to worry about mature men, but there is a group that we should be very worried about. Boys and young men, which includes my youngest son and all my grandsons. In the United States, indeed throughout the developed world, they are clearly not doing as well as girls and young women. I say the hell with that. We need to care about men, all boys, all young men. Everyone who's male is a human being worthy of value and worthy of being cared for. This is a toxic belief system. It really is, fellas. And we need to start communicating just how awful and disgusting and despicable these beliefs are. Because we believe this shit about ourselves. We deny our own humanness, our own humanity, when we think this way. We negate the self, and that's destructive. And if we still lived in a world where our self-negation was rewarded, and we were valorized and supported and rewarded and appreciated for doing that, it might be a different story. But we don't live in that world anymore. We live in a world now where there is every expectation that we are to negate ourselves, deny our own humanity for the sake of others, particularly women and children, and we're not even supposed to expect anything in return for that. And I say no. I reject that idea. You may have already seen data comparing how young American males and females are doing today, but one of the best comparisons comes from Tom Mortensen, a senior scholar at the Pell Institute for the Study of Opportunity in Higher Education. In his often cited, "For every 100 girls, here is a sampling of his statistics. For every 100 10th grade girls who play video games for an hour or more a day, there are 322 10th grade boys who do. For every 100 girls who are suspended from high school, there are 215 boys who are suspended. For every 100 young women who earn a bachelor's degree, there are 75 men who do. For every women ages 25 to 29 who have at least a bachelor's degree, there are 83 men who do. For every woman ages 25 to 29 who have a doctoral degree, there are 80 men who do. For every woman ages 15 to 24 who kill themselves, 586 men do. For every 100 women ages 18 to 24 who are in correctional facilities, there are 1,439 men who are behind bars. That is an enormous disadvantage. Societal, systemic, structural disadvantage. For being a boy, for being a young man, for being a man. That is sexism, fellas. And if it was the other way around, if women were struggling in this way or having these particular problems, society would care. Men would care. Women would care. But unfortunately, because of our evolutionary history and innate aspects of our biology, men don't care about other men. And this needs to stop. We don't care about ourselves, and that needs to stop. I don't think anyone can legitimately argue that, as a group, boys and young men aren't having more problems than girls and young women, including falling behind them at every educational level, and yet, politically, this is still not a front burner issue. Why not? Because we are conditioned and biologically incentivized to not care about boys and men. Boys and men are only cared about or concerned for when they are valuable to others, when they produce more than they need for themselves. Part of it is that those titles claiming the end of males or questioning their necessity all say men, a word that does not generally elicit concern or compassion. However, given the data, it is high time to think of those titles as applying to those who will become men, that is, boys, our sons and grandsons. I would urge that anytime you see a reference to the end of men, think of it as the end of boys, because ultimately that is what it truly means. Yes, it does. And ask not whether men are necessary, but whether boys are necessary. Think of that debate resolution, boys are finished. Or if you prefer, our sons and grandsons are finished. It's disgusting, right? I think so. And I'm sick of this shit. I do understand that for many, a shift to concern about many males of any age will be difficult. I am well aware of the damage of that sexism has done. This is sexism. This is sexism. He can't even recognize the connection. This is sexism. He continues, I always come close to tears when I talk about my late mother-in-law, a brilliant woman born into relative poverty in the early 1920s, who worked at jobs far beneath her intelligence and abilities because that is what women did before the modern women's movement. At the age of 70, she graduated with honors from a prestigious college, but died 4 years later. I have rarely met someone so able to challenge arguments with great counter-arguments. She would have made a wonderful attorney. So I do get it. Well, what about the man who was highly intelligent, but because he was born into poverty, he wasn't able to go get an education to get a job that supported a family. So instead, he had to do manual labor, working 10 hours a day in some horrible hazardous conditions so that he could take care of a woman and kids. What about him? Is that not sexist there too? But again, he doesn't concern himself with that other half of the reality. Feminism doesn't tell the whole story. Feminism paints a picture of the human past being one where it's heaven for men and hell for women, and that's just not true. It's not true at all. And he continues, but my 3 daughters-in-law, all born between 1961 and 1983, knew they could do whatever they wanted. They are, of course, the beneficiaries of a women's movement that was necessary and important, and still very much is in many parts of the world. But in our country today and in much of the developed world, even the most casual look at statistics will show that it is our young males who need our help and attention far more than our young females. Ultimately, I believe the impetus will have to come from the parents and grandparents of boys, though I can sense in feminists with sons the conflicts they feel around this issue. As author Phyllis Chesler has written, having a son, not a daughter, was a challenge to my passionate woman-centered feminism. Yes, this is very common. It is very common for rabid feminists, once they have a son, to finally realize that their belief system and their ideology may not paint the entire picture. That's the way this works, unfortunately, guys. For issues around men's problems, men's issues broadly speaking, the only way most people are ever going to come to grips with this reality is when they have sons of their own. Or, as is the case for most of us who get involved in this stuff, we have some terrible experience in the family court system, or with an abusive spouse, or some other terrible experience that wakes us up about our unique experience, the unique male experience, the unique male hell. Closer to home, he continues, I have listened to a feminist friend talk with concern about her only child, a son in his early 30s, who has struggled with work and relationships. In her own work as a professor in the humanities, she has seen her classes dominated by young women, not only in numbers, but in participation and academic performance. What do you think? Why do you think this is happening? I asked her, referring to her classes. She replied without hesitation, "It's the women's movement." I know she is worried about her son, but as I have seen so many times when parents talk about the problems their sons are having, they see it as an individual problem and not a social one. I am sure it is hard for her to accept the possibility that the feminism she so strongly believes in might have, by ignoring boys, allowed a progressively more unbalanced situation to develop, one in which her son is caught up. A good role model for feminists today could be Dottie Lamb, former First Lady of Colorado and well known in her state for her activism, often on behalf of women. In an op-ed piece in the Denver Post in April 2010, titled "Boys Are Falling Behind in Education," Lamb begins with these words. What's the next battle for an aging feminist? Boys. Granted, the battle for women's rights and equality has not been completely won, but the new reality is that in the future it will be males who are the most endangered. I would say it has been won in the West. And she ends with this: if a men's movement develops for boys, I'll join it. And as an aging feminist, I'll still fight to take big chunks out of that glass ceiling for women. But as a grandmother of 3 young boys, I'm going to do my darndest to keep young boys from sinking into that academic mud floor. I admire Dottie Lamb's courage and feel that she represents the future if we are to prevent the end of boys. Unless you think the end of boys is too strong a term, consider the fact that, given the current situation where so many boys are struggling and girls appear to have an unlimited future in our country, a growing number of prospective parents are using reproductive technology to enhance the likelihood of having girls. Think about that. A lot of parents are using reproductive technology now to make sure that they have girls and not boys. Hannah Rosen starts her End of Men piece with a reference to biologist Ronald Erickson, who in the 1970s found a way to separate the sperm carrying the Y chromosome from those carrying the X chromosome, thus providing a means for determining the sex of one's child. By the 1990s, Erickson found that couples in clinics using his technique were requesting more girls than boys, a gap that has persisted. In some clinics, Erickson has said, the ratio is now as high as 2 to 1. Rosen also cites a newer method for sperm selection called microsort. The girl requests for that method run at about 75%. And finally, there is this from the August 10th, 2011 New York Times Magazine piece on twin reduction, the highly controversial practice of doctors delivering only one of 2 twins born by aborting the other. Doctors choose randomly which fetus to eliminate when both are healthy and equally accessible, unless they are of different sexes. Then some doctors ask the parents which one they want to keep. Until the last decade, most doctors refused even to broach that question, but that ethical demarcation has eroded as ever more patients lobby for the option, and doctors discover that most or plenty opt for girls. Other than infanticide, could anything more literally be the end of boys? That's the thing, guys. The history of our species has been the history where women have been loved more than they've been respected, and men have been respected more than they've been loved. And when you eliminate the need for survival, as has happened in the modern Western world, what do you think is going to take place? Girls are loved and boys are not. Women are loved and men are needed. And so when we live in a society that is essentially safe, where survival is not a threat, and the disposable sex is not needed to keep the world safe anymore, if we don't love them just for who they are, what do you think is going to happen? They're going to be eliminated. They're going to be forgotten. They're going to be left behind. They're going to be disposed of. And that's us. It's me. It's you. And it's up to us to do something about that. That's the end of the video, fellas. If you want to hit the like button, please go ahead and do so. I'd appreciate it. If you want to hit the dislike button, please go ahead and hit the dislike button and let me know why by commenting below. If you want to contact me directly, you can contact me directly at therevolutionarymail@gmail.com. Again, fellas, my name is Alex. This has been The Revolutionary Mail, and I will see you in the next video.